But last year, I was in the erecting shop, and that's where mostly it was maintenance of existing locomotives, so there were some new ones built. And the locomotives would come in and would be stripped down to their frames and various parts sent off to the machine shops. And then it would go round. There were rails where we worked and a sort of transporter thing. So the locomotive, no tenders, the tenders went somewhere else. The locomotives would come in and run onto the first rail, and then we strip them down, and then they'd move on round until at the other end there were locomotives again, which was very nice. But the erecting shop, there was more teamwork. Wheeling a locomotive was essentially teamwork. The 6 driving wheels were 3 pairs of wheels were up on top of an inspection pit, and the locomotive with its boiler and cab and things held up on big cranes, and the locomotive had to be dropped onto the wheels, and on each wheel was an axle box, and in the frame were slots, steel slots, and as the locomotive came down, we had to tip. It always came down slightly at an angle, and we had to tip the axle boxes to catch. We had about 10,000ths of an inch, something like that. We had to catch the axle box as it came down, and outside was the charge hand daffing up and down, and a couple of chaps with steel poles who could adjust the wheel a little bit on the top of the rails at the top of the just a little bit, otherwise the wheels would come down into the pit, which we wouldn't enjoy at all. And the crane man was up above, and his mate was below, and his mate would send all the signals to the crane man. So all these people, 6 men in the pit and men outside, crane men, all these people were engaged in a task, and we all relied on one another. And that was really quite special to me, that sense of doing something with other people. The apprentice worked with a fitter, or in the erecting shop with an erector, although we always called them fitters. So you had to get on with the guy that you were working with, and they varied greatly from one to another. I worked with one who was also a town councillor, in a labour interest, of course, and he would just tell me what to do, and then wander off to chat Labour Party or town council business to other members. We actually, I think there must have been 3 or 4 town councillors in the erecting shop. It was the most militant part of the railway works. Yeah. So yeah, the fitter you work with, comme ci, comme ça, really. Yeah. I grew to like the railway factory more as I got through my apprenticeship. The first 2 years was lathe work, working with various kinds of lathes, and I didn't like that. I'm standing in the same place all day, working a lathe. I found I just didn't much like it, and really for the first year or 2, I didn't want to be in a railway factory. I simply didn't. I loved the old GWR, which of course was nationalised by the time I went. Love the old GWR, I love steam engines. I'm a steam person, but I'm not a factory person. In the factory, we worked a 44-hour, 5-day week. Now, I don't think 44 is the normal working week anymore, but it certainly was in those days. And in the winter of 1951, or possibly 1952, I'm not never sure which now, because of fuel shortages in the whole country, we had to work a 4-day week, which meant that we were 11 hours in the factory. Teenagers, 11 hours, as well as adult men. The chance of an apprenticeship was one that I was told could not be missed, because people had to pay for apprenticeships unless they were privileged. And my privilege was that my father was a charge hand blacksmith. So that, in the gradings of the old GWR, meant that I was entitled to a first-class trade. Never mind about whether I had any interest in engineering, any inclination or capacity. If my father had the right job, I could have a trade. And that's where I was at the beginning. I was supposed to, as well as go to work, to go to night school 3 nights a week. And several months into my apprenticeship, that stopped. They were telling me the things that I'd been told at school, and I was too bored, so I didn't go on. When I came out for my first deferment, I went to see a bloke in the offices, and he said, "Are you going to night school?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Well, that we may not be able to ask for a deferment." And I said, "Please yourself," because that's how I felt. And but I got the deferment, so I stayed to the end of my apprenticeship, and it should have been a 5-year apprenticeship, but because of the unions said that from the age of 21 you should get full man's rate. The railway, British Rail, said, well, in that case, then if an apprentice has done 4 years, he's finished his apprenticeship. So, which was since I was nearly 17 when I actually signed up for the indentures. This was a great relief. Otherwise, I'd been 22 before I got in the army, near enough. So at 21, I finished my apprenticeship, and then 3 weeks later, into the army I went. The main thing, well, not the main thing, but perhaps one thing certainly, is that apprentice pay went up every year, but it was still measly. And as soon as the apprenticeship finished, it went on to the man's rate, and it was something like £9, 10 shillings a week, and that was a massive amount of money for me. And I was 3 weeks on £9, 10 shillings a week, and I found myself in the army on 4 shillings a day, which went down badly. Went down badly.